Revealed. Incredible journey of a Texas chef's transformation from family man to heartless killer. Gus Monroe was a man who wore his heart on his sleeve, the beloved barbecue chef of Willow Creek. Every Saturday, the local farmers market was alive with laughter and the alluring scents of his famous ribs and brisket, tender and smoky, bringing families together like the glue of their small town. Just last week, Gus had served his barbecue to a line of smiling faces, each bite igniting joy and rekindling memories of family gatherings filled with love. With his high school sweetheart, Lisa, at his side and their two spirited children dancing nearby, life was idyllic, or so it seemed. But then, the winds shifted. One fateful morning, the sign on Gus's restaurant betrayed them, closed. The emptiness that followed pierced deeper than any blade. Bills piled up like discarded plates after a feast. Debts loomed like dark clouds, all while the things he loved most slipped further from his grasp. In his desperation, he felt the weight of unfulfilled dreams. His identity as the town's cherished chef began to crumble. The laughter at home dulled. He watched as Lisa's smiles faded, replaced by the worry in her eyes. The kids, once loud and rambunctious, quieted, sensing the tension. It crushed him. What kind of provider was he if he couldn't even keep a roof over their heads? Each night, he'd lie awake, dread clawing at his chest, wondering if he'd have to sacrifice his honor for their survival. Then came the moment that would change everything. One long, chilly autumn night. Panic crept in like a thief. An idea lured him toward the shadows, a desperate attempt to save his family. He knew it was wrong, but he felt trapped. In his blind haste, he was swept into a robbery gone wrong. Horror unleashed before his eyes. An innocent life was lost. He was left holding the weight of his choice. Life spiraling into chaos. The community once united in admiration, now murmuring betrayal. People he fed countless times now watched him with disdain. Faces once warm turned cold. Friends he once called brothers avoided his gaze. He joined circles that thrived in darkness, a world he never imagined. The grumbling of his heart echoed the whispers that taunted him. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As he staggered deeper into this abyss, thoughts of Sunday dinners at the family table seemed like a distant dream. The blend of brisket and laughter now felt so far away. The line between survival and morality blurred each day, and a cold dread settled in. Would his family ever look at him the same? Could they find hope in the midst of despair? With the town divided, Gus stood at a precipice, the shadows whispering dark promises while a flicker of hope fought to survive within him. He faced a decision that could change the course of his life forever. Would he step back into the light and reclaim his role as a husband and father, or surrender to the darkness that threatened to consume him? With the weight of his choices bearing down, he felt the ground shift beneath him, leaving him gasping for a way out. The community that once rallied together now watched in anticipation, waiting for his next move. Would he rise from the ashes, or be pulled deeper into the void? Gus Monroe stood in the dim light of his kitchen, the once cheerful space now a haunting reminder of what had been. The seasoned wood countertops, worn smooth from years of love and care, felt foreign beneath his fingertips. He could almost hear the echoes of laughter, the way his children would streak through the door, their small feet patting against the floor. But now, those sounds had been swallowed by an emptiness that gnawed at his heart. He scanned the room. Pots hung above him like silent sentinels, waiting for a chef who might never return. The grill, which had once filled the air with tantalizing aromas, stood silent and cold, just like him. The weight of his choices pressed down harder with each passing day, a constant reminder of the innocent blood on his hands. Each thought of the past clashed violently with the horror he felt in the present. Where had that joyful man gone? As he prepared to leave the house, his heart raced. There was a meeting tonight, one that could alter the course of his life yet again. Gus had been pulled deeper into a world that thrived on desperation, where quick fixes overshadowed morality, and bonds were forged in the dark. As he stepped out, he hesitated at the door, glancing back at the shadows behind him. What would he find on the other side? As he locked the door, that same cold dread twisted in his gut. The streets of Willow Creek felt alien now, as if they were holding their breath in anticipation. Every face he passed seemed scrutinizing, grappling with suspicion and contempt. His heart beat loudly in his chest, the rhythm of guilt and fear intertwined. He saw old friends in the distance, the way they whispered and pointed. He was a ghost wandering through his own life, invisible to the warmth he once basked in. Arriving at the back of an abandoned warehouse, he felt the raw tension of the air as he approached the alley. The gang he had begun to associate with waited in the shadows, their faces carved from a hard life, men who wore their pain like a badge. They were nothing like the friendly farmers and families he was used to. For a moment, he hesitated, doubt wrestling with the need to belong. "Gus," one of them called, a figure emerging from the darkness, his grin wide, yet menacing. "You ready for the plan?" The plan, what a word to call the twisted scheme that could lead to more hurt and sorrow. But what choice did he have? With his family's future on his shoulders, he felt shackled by circumstance. "Yes," he said, the word escaping his lips like a prayer. He stepped further into the scuffle of shadows, feeling the familiar tingle of danger that both scared and thrilled him. As he joined the group, a sharp laugh rang out. A part of him wanted to step back, to yell out for redemption, but instead, he tightened his grip around his resolve. They began to outline their strategy, each word weaving him deeper into a web he knew he might never escape. Every detail echoed in his head. The stakes were rising. As they finalized everything, a rush of adrenaline surged through him. This wasn't who he was. And yet, here he stood, invested in a life full of deceit and pain. Would he ever find his way back to the man who could cook up laughter and joy on a plate? The air was thick with anticipation, each heartbeat pounding a rhythm of despair. Would he sacrifice everything for a fleeting glimpse of power and control, or would courage awaken the chef once more? As he walked back into the shadows, Gus felt the ground rumble beneath his feet. There was no turning back now. The whispers of his past still echoed in his mind, urging him to remember who he truly was. The moment of truth was coming. Was he ready to face it? Gus felt the air shift as he stepped deeper into the alley with the gang, each shadow a reminder of the life he had chosen, or more accurately, the life that had chosen him. They were all eyes on him, watching for any hesitation, any signs that he was still clinging to the man he used to be. But what if he wanted to cling, and yet did not know how? "All right, listen up." The leader, Marco, barked, his voice stern and commanding. "Tonight's operation is simple, nothing complicated. We hit the drop-off point, grab the cash, and get out. Fast." There was a kind of thrill in Marco's eyes as he spoke, like a kid tasting candy for the first time. The others murmured their agreement, excitement palpable in the dim light. Gus blinked, swallowing hard as his stomach churned. Fast. That word could mean everything or nothing. It could mean a lot of money or a lot of blood. As the plan unfolded, he struggled to hear the details, each pulse in his ears drowning out the sound. It felt less like a plan and more like a noose tightening around his neck. "Gus." Marco turned to him, snapping his fingers. "You'll take the lead. We need someone who knows the streets." For a brief moment, the world froze. He felt the weight of their eyes on him, piercing through the doubt and confusion swirling in his mind. "Led?" It was a word he had not been prepared for. The image of his children's laughter flickered like an old film reel in his mind. Was this the trade-off for trying to keep them safe? "Sure," he managed to say, the words slipping out like a broken promise. Inside, turmoil raged. He could almost hear their soft voices calling to him, begging him to turn around, return home. But push forward he did. They moved under the cover of darkness, each step closer to the drop-off point sending shivers down his spine. Despite the hooded streetlights and murky corners, every sound seemed amplified: the rustle of leaves, the distant wail of sirens, his own heart hammering against his chest. Was this what fear felt like, or was it something worse? A blend of adrenaline and dread. As they approached the spot, a rundown warehouse identical to the one he had met them in, Gus's mind raced. He saw himself on a makeshift stage, about to perform a cruel play. The shadows slithered around him, and all he could see were visions of his children's faces, their trusting smiles haunting him. "Stay alert," Marco whispered, signaling for them to stop. "We wait here." Gus's breath caught in his throat. He could hear muffled voices in the distance, a group of men clearly animated about something. Was this moment for the taking? He leaned against the cold, unwelcoming wall, trying to steady his nerves, trying not to drown in the profound choice that lay before him. Just then, his phone buzzed in his pocket, startling him. He fished it out, heart racing as he recognized the name. It was her. Charlie, his sister, the last person who still believed in him. "Gus, please call me. I'm worried." He could almost hear her voice, filled with concern, pleading for him to come back to her. It was like a lifebuoy thrown his way in a stormy sea. Should he respond, or would that risk everything? The tension between who he was and who he had become hung thick in the air. "Focus," Marco hissed, pulling him back from the brink. "This isn't a game." The urgency hit him like a slap, and Gus felt a shift in the energy around him. With every moment that passed, his heart was torn in two, one side yearning for the past, the other thrust into a dark, uncertain future. He stood at a crossroads, time slipping through his fingers. And then, a single gunshot rang out in the distance. Everyone froze. What was that? Someone whispered, a tremor running through his voice. Gus's eyes widened, his thoughts racing. The game had changed. Would he remain a pawn, or would he choose to fight for his soul? "Get ready," Marco shouted, his sharp command shattering the moment of stillness. As Gus braced himself for whatever chaos lay ahead, he realized one thing: this was no longer just about survival. It was about reclaiming who he used to be. But could he do this without losing everything again? The ground beneath him trembled once more, and the real battle was just beginning. Gus could feel the adrenaline pumping through his veins, every beat of his heart staccato like thunder in his ears. The shadows around him seemed to pulse with life of their own, dark tendrils stretching toward him, beckoning him deeper into the abyss. Marco's voice cut through the noise, but it barely registered. It felt surreal, like watching someone else's life unfold from a distance. "Gus, move." Marco's voice was a whip crack in the quiet. Without thinking, he sprang into action, his legs propelling him forward. The crack of the gunshot still echoed in his mind like a ghost. What if it had been meant for him, fired from someone lurking in the dark? Goosebumps raced down his arms, but he didn't dare look back. They were approaching the warehouse, the outline monstrous against the night sky, lighting up with harsh fluorescence. The entrance gaped like a throat ready to swallow him whole. He was supposed to be leading, but all he could think about was getting through this, getting home, where the laughter of his children was still safe in his memory. They ducked behind a stack of crates, the moist smell of the wood mingling with the stale air. Gus held his breath, peeking out to see what lay ahead. Two men stood at the entrance, exchanging words in a tense but casual manner. Their postures screamed caution, but their laughs betrayed a relaxation that felt dangerous. Panic coursed through him again. This wasn't just a job. It wasn't just a routine he could manage. The stakes had risen, maybe dangerously so. "Okay, Gus," Marco whispered, bringing him back to the moment. "You know the plan. You distract, we move." Gus mind word. He felt like he was juggling knives, one slip away from losing it all. If he faced them, if he said something to disrupt their conversation, what would that change? Distract? He whispered hoarsely. "What if they don't play along? Just do it." Marco hissed, exasperation flaring. With a swift exhale, Gus nodded. He was out of options, and running into the unknown seemed both terrifying and exhilarating. "All right." On three, when Marco whispered the count, every number felt like stepping into a minefield. 1, 2, 3. Gus leaped from cover, startling the two men. "Hey, you guys lost," he called, his voice louder than he intended, reverberating off the cold warehouse walls. The men turned, eyes narrowing as they assessed him. He forced a laugh, trying to ease the tension. "Thought you could use some directions. That's one hell of a warehouse party. Why all got going on?" They exchanged a glance. One chuckled, but it was laced with suspicion. "Who the hell are you?" Before Gus could respond, Marco and the others sprang into action, rushing from their hiding places. Chaos erupted as fists flew and feet scrambled. The sound of the scuffle was an orchestra of grunted shouts and the pounding of bodies against each other. Gus flew backward under the sudden push of adrenaline and fear. He couldn't just hang back and watch. This was about more than survival now, it was about reclaiming his life. He waded into the mix, adrenaline fueling a surge of denial. He could do this, he could be someone again. A flurry of fists. A wild lunge. He could feel the heat of the conflict, the raw energy uncoiling inside him. He was fighting, but not just against the men in front of him. He was fighting against the man he had become and clawing toward the flicker of the father he once was. But just as he thought he could turn it around, a shadow moved behind him. A sharp voice shouted, "Get down." Gus's heart dropped as he spun around, only to see a gun leveled at him. He froze, caught once again between his past and the fierce reality of this moment. The world seemed to slow, every heartbeat echoing with the urgent truth this was it. What would he choose, in the face of what was coming? With a clear shot at the next step, everything he cared about hung in the balance. Would this bullet shape his future, or would he finally shape it himself? Gus's breath hitched in his throat as he stared into the icy eyes of the man behind the gun. Time froze. He could feel the cold metal pressing against the fabric of his shirt, as if it were an actual part of him, melding with his skin. The chaos around him faded, muffled by the thumping of his heart. "Put it down." Marco's voice boomed, a fierce protector, even in this dark moment. But that single command felt like a whisper in a storm. The gunman merely smirked, a cruel twist of his lips. "You think anyone will save you, cowboy? You don't know the game you're playing." Gus's mind raced. Control slipped from his fingers, much like the threads of his once stable life. He thought of his children Brooklyn's easy laughter, the goodnight kisses from Henry that made everything feel normal. Would they ever understand? Would they forgive him for the man he had let slip away? Gus Monroe tried again, inching closer, hands raised to show he meant no harm. The gunman's hand twitched. "You say another word, and I'll make sure you never see them again." Gus's body hummed with fear and desperation, every instinct screaming to fight or flee. He shifted his weight, grouping the feelings of confusion, regret, and a ferocious need to live. "You don't want to do this," he said, his voice steady, though his insides quaked. "Yeah? And why is that?" The gunman challenged, eyes narrowing, searching for weakness. "Because I'm not the one you think I am." It was a gamble, but one driven by an instinct deeper than self-preservation. Gus knew he couldn't let fear dictate his decisions anymore. "I'm fighting for my family." The man scoffed. "You think that gives you power?" "It gives me purpose." The words hung in the air, a fragile promise poised above danger. In a split second, everything changed. The gunman's moment of hesitation flipped the script. Marco lunged. It wasn't calculated. It was instinct, pure determination. Gus felt adrenaline surge again, echoing through every pore. Time snapped back into motion. He rushed forward, a fierce protector of his own life. In a chaotic tangle, he threw himself at the gunman, feeling more alive than he had in years. A deafening shot rang out, the explosion of sound shattering the air. Gus flinched, expecting pain. Instead, he felt the gunman jerk, surprised, and then released the weapon as he stumbled backward. Grabbing the prototype, Gus wrestled it away, sending it clattering across the ground. He couldn't think about what had happened. All that mattered was survival. "Gus!" Marco shouted, fending off an attacker with fierce blows. "We need to regroup." Guts twisting, Gus now saw two things with clarity. The fight for his life mirrored his fight for his family. This wasn't just an encounter. This was his reckoning. He straightened, cleaning away any doubt, adrenaline coursing wildly. There was more at stake than just him. The fight surged in him like an unexpected wave. For the first time, he felt like he had a purpose with each punch thrown, every footstep forward. He reclaimed a piece of who he once was. But as he stepped back into the fray, he realized something chilling. In the shadows, more figures emerged. A chill ran through him, an ominous reminder that the night was far from over. How deep would this rabbit hole go? And how much would he be willing to lose before it all ended? Gus felt the surge of fear wash over him as he faced the encroaching shadows. Every instinct urged him to run, but the fight blazed in him now, born from an urgent need to protect his family, to save them from this nightmare. "Marco!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We need to get to the exit." Marco nodded, sweat glistening on his brow as he battled another assailant. "Move." He threw a punch that sent his attacker sprawling. Gus didn't think twice. He bolted toward the nearest doorway, scanning for any sign of safety. But the shadows were thicker than he'd imagined, figures emerging like phantoms. He could feel them closing in, a suffocating grip tightening around his resolve. "Stay close," he called out to Marco, his heart hammering in his chest. The rhythm of the fight ignited something fierce within him, a primal instinct to fight for what truly mattered. A sharp pain punctured the moment as a figure swung in Gus's direction. He ducked instinctively, feeling the wind whoosh by as the attacker barely missed him. He retaliated with a punch that found its mark, but it didn't matter, they were outnumbered. "Retreat," Marco yelled, finally breaking free from his latest foe. "We have to regroup and plan." Gus glanced behind him. More figures lurked, their expressions cold and intent. Was this their last stand? A flicker of despair threatened to creep in, but he swatted it down. Not now. He'd come too far to give in. "Through here." Marco pointed toward a nearby office. They darted inside, barricading the door with a heavy filing cabinet, breathing heavily in the darkened room, lit only by the faint glow of a faulty overhead light. Gus leaned against the wall, struggling to catch his breath. Panic flickered in his chest as he pulled out his phone, hoping for a signal. Nothing. "Think we lost them?" Marco panted, wiping sweat from his brow. Gus shook his head. "They'll be back. We're not safe yet." He felt a weight settle in his gut, dread mingling with protectiveness. "Maybe we can find another way out," Marco suggested, scanning the room. As they looked around, Gus' eyes fell upon a small window, just large enough to squeeze through. "That might work," he said, half hopeful. A sudden crash exploded against the door, sending tremors through the room. Their pursuers were relentless. Time was running out. "Go. I'll clear the way," Marco shouted, before Gus could object. The sense of urgency set in this was a gamble, but it was one they had no choice but to take. Gus nodded, adrenaline pumping as he slipped toward the window. He pushed it open, feeling the cool breeze hit his face. Freedom was so close he could almost taste it. Just as he was about to climb through, the door splintered under another fierce blow. "Gus!" Marco yelled, a frantic urgency coating his tone. He didn't hesitate. With a final look back, he climbed through the window, landing awkwardly on the damp grass outside. He scanned the area, searching for Marco, for safety, for anything that could guide them home. Just then, he heard another gunshot, echoing like thunder in the night. Desperation swelled in his chest. Where was Marco? Marco. The world narrowed, focused only on the sound of his name. As Gus stumbled around the corner of the building, he froze. There stood Marco, a figure emerging from the darkness, a chilling silhouette in the night. But it wasn't he, just the gunman from before. This one was different. Stronger, more menacing. "Marco!" Gus shouted, running towards him, the urgency pulsing in his veins. But as he closed the distance, he realized his friend was unarmed, disarmed by an unseen force. The realization hit him hard. What more would they have to face tonight? Would they ever escape this nightmare? Fear gripped him tighter than any enemy could, for in that moment, he wondered if he was ready to sacrifice everything to save the one person fighting beside him. Would he go that far? The chilling silence between them thickened an awareness that the darkest part of this night had yet to reveal itself. The chilling quiet was broken only by the crackle of leaves underfoot as Gus approached Marco, a sickening dread coiling in his stomach. The gunman stood with a sly smile, eyes glinting like dark stones. There was no way to tell how many others were lurking in the shadows. "Get back!" Marco shouted, his voice shaky but resolute. He is not alone. Gus's heart pounded louder, drowning out any rational thoughts. He could feel the weight of the world pressing down on him. What did that smile mean? "Sad to see you two struggling," the gunman taunted. "I thought you'd put up more of a fight." Gus barely registered Marco's movement at his side, his friend edging closer, fists clenched, ready for anything. The determination in Marco's stance lit a flicker of hope inside Gus, even as panic threatened to overshadow it. "Don't let him get to you," Marco said under his breath, their eyes locked for a fleeting moment. Then, Marco lunged, drawing all the attention as Gus held his breath. A blur of motion, the gunman fired just as Marco dove. The bullet whizzed past, too close, a stark reminder of the dangers surrounding them. With adrenaline fueling him, Gus dashed forward, heart racing as he wrestled with the fear constricting his throat. "Get up!" he yelled at Marco as he closed the gap, desperation surging. What could he do? He felt the raw need to protect wash over him, racing through his veins. We have to keep moving. The gunman laughed, pacing like a predator, and they formed a loose circle. You think you can outrun this? He sneered, twirling his weapon. You don't even know what you're up against. Gus couldn't help but wonder what exactly was at stake, and how had they gotten here? The memories of laughter with his family, the warmth of home, now felt impossibly far. Could it all be lost to this man? We're not afraid of you, Marco shouted, his voice resonating with an urgency Gus hadn't felt before. But the gunman just shook his head, a sinister grin stretching across his face. Fear is not just an emotion, it's a weapon, and you're about to learn just how sharp it can be. Before Gus could register what he meant, the shadows behind the gunman shifted, revealing more figures emerging like wraiths. Their faces were etched with malice, eyes flickering with hair-raising confidence. Gus felt the world tilting, darkness closing in. Run! Marco screamed, breaking the deadly stillness. They turned, sprinting away from the gathering dread, their breath heavy in their lungs. The chill night air rushed past them as they dashed for the nearest cover, a dense thicket that might provide a brief pause, a chance to gather their thoughts. Why are they doing this? Gus huffed, glancing back. The silhouettes lurked, closing in with a pace that belied their earlier nonchalance. No time to think about that, Marco urged. We need to vanish. No more fighting without a plan. Gus nodded, but the worry clawed at his insides. They had no plan, just an instinct to survive. Was survival worth risking everything? The thought gnawed at him, intertwined with the hope of seeing his family again. As they plunged into the thicket, branches snagged at their clothing, tearing at their skin. Panic surged anew as the sounds of pursuit grew louder, the footsteps pounded like thunder, a storm of menacing determination. They fell deeper into the dark canopy, limbs brittle like dry twigs, fear chasing them with every breath. Together, Marco said, grasping Gus's arm, a lifeline in tumultuous seas. Before he could respond, a violent crack echoed as branches fell to the ground behind them. Gus shot a glance over his shoulder, catching the fierce glint of weapons in motion. They were gaining ground. We have to split up, Gus insisted, his voice tight. Maybe we can confuse them. No, Marco barked back, frustration flaring. We stay together or listen. Gus pressed, a thought striking him. At the old storage shed, the one on the other side of the property. We can hide there. For a moment, indecision hung in the air. Then Marco nodded sharply. Fine, we head that way. They turned as one, pushing harder, driven by instinct and fear. But as they ran, the sense of separation loomed, creeping closer. Would they really stand a chance if they lost each other in this darkness? And what about the threat that lurked behind? With every step forward, a realization dawned. Fear could bend them, could break them, or could forge them into something stronger than they knew they could be. But at what cost? The gunmen were still close behind, their laughter mixing with the echo of chaos. Silence was fading fast. As they reached the edge of the thicket, the shed came into view, a flicker of hope amidst the dread. But the shadows were closing in again, each breath heavy with urgency. Could they really disappear into the night, or would the darkness finally claim them? Gus, Marco shouted, pulling on his arm. Now or never. The hoarse urgency in his voice ignited a fire within Gus. Holding on to hope, they dove toward their one chance of salvation, knowing that the nightmares of tonight had only just begun to unravel. Gus and Marco burst through the door of the old storage shed, the wooden frame creaking under the force of their entrance. Inside, a musty smell hit them, damp and stale, but it was a sanctuary compared to the chaos outside. Dark corners wrapped around them like an embrace, offering a momentary reprieve. Gus slammed the door behind them, breathing hard, his lungs burning like fire. He leaned back against the door, heart racing as they listened. The sounds of pursuit were closer now, chaos ringing through the night air, laughter mingling with distant shouts. We can't stay here long, Marco breathed, glancing around the cramped space. There were crates stacked haphazardly, cobwebs draping every surface. It felt like being trapped in a forgotten memory. What if they come in? Gus whispered, his voice shaking. The shadows felt alive, crawling along the walls, pressing in on him. Panic surged again, twisting in his gut. Marco stepped closer, urgency in his eyes. We need a plan. We can't just sit here and wait for them. They know something about us, about where we're going. A flare of anger mixed with fear speared through Gus. What more could they know? They're just trying to scare us. No, Gus, it goes deeper than that, Marco said, urgency spiking in his tone. This isn't random. They're after something. We need to figure it out. Gus shook his head, frustration flaring. How could they figure anything out when they were barely mere steps ahead of danger? We can't think straight right now. Marco's voice softened. Let us take a minute. Breathe. Taking a deep breath, Gus tried to slow the whirlwind inside him. He focused on the dim light peeking through cracks in the wood, imagining a way out. A part of him still clung to hope, but with every echo of laughter outside, that hope felt more fragile. They're playing with us, Gus muttered, trying to scare us into making a mistake. Let them play, Marco replied, the fire in his voice steadying Gus's nerves. We'll trick them first. We know this land better than they do. The thought sparked something in Gus. A rush of resolve surged through him. The old train tracks what? Marco's brow furrowed. Remember? They run behind the shed. If we can reach them, we can cut them off. We can make our way to the creek, Gus said, his heart racing as he pieced the plan together. Then it's settled. We wait for them to get a little closer, then we make a break for it. Marco nodded, determination flooding his voice. Gus took a moment, stealing glances at the shadows beyond their sanctuary. With every crack and rustle, he felt the mounting tension, a knot tightening in his chest. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being hunted. That fear was the real enemy. Listen, Marco whispered, leaning toward the door as the laughter outside faded, leaving only the sound of heavy footsteps. Can you hear that? Instinctively, Gus pressed his ear against the cold wood, straining to listen. It grew louder, the foliage being crushed beneath heavy boots. And then he heard snippets. Where do they go? And check the shed. His heart plummeted. They're coming, Gus said, panic creeping back into his voice. We have to move now. On three, Marco said, steeling himself. 1, 2, 3. They flung the door open and charged into the night, adrenaline coursing through them. The world outside blurred into a frenzied darkness, confusion wrapping around them as they sprinted toward the tracks, hope and fear battling for dominance in their hearts. But as they reached the edge of the property, a horrifying realization hit them. Behind them, the moonlight glinted off something metallic. Gus! Marco shouted, pulling back in horror. They've found us. Before they could react, a figure emerged, a silhouette, tall and menacing, blocking their escape. It was the gunman, smiling that malevolent smile again. Did you really think you could get away from me? He sneered, raising his weapon, the darkness swallowing the light of their last chance. Gus's breath caught in his throat. They had run straight into the jaws of danger. No direction left to go. Every heartbeat echoing the reality of their dire situation. Why are you doing this? Gus managed to shout, desperation spilling from his lips. The gunman paused, catching Gus's gaze. Because watching you two squirm is the best kind of entertainment. Gus felt the world narrowing, the terror threatening to explode. But just then, from somewhere behind him, there was an unexpected sound. A roar, echoing across the night. It can't be, Marco said, glancing back. What was coming toward them? And could it be their salvation, or would it seal their fate? As the figure loomed closer, the answer hung in the air, heavy with uncertainty. The roar grew louder, an earthquake of sound that vibrated through the ground beneath them. With every second that passed, uncertainty twisted deeper into their hearts. Gus felt his pulse quicken, the shadows of dread forced momentarily aside by curiosity. Gus, we need to move, Marco urged, his eyes darting between the looming gunman and whatever was crashing through the underbrush. But before they could take a single step, something massive burst into view, a wild boar, charging forward with an unexpected ferocity. It paused, snorting, its eyes glinting with a primal rage as it stood between the boys and the gunman. What the hell? The gunman shouted, taken aback, the weapon faltering in his grip. This sudden chaos opened a narrow window of opportunity. Go, Marco shouted, grabbing Gus's arm and yanking him toward the tracks. The moment stretched, each heartbeat pounded against their ears, drowning out logic. In that freeze frame of fear and decision, they turned and sprinted for the safety of the old tracks, the boar throwing itself into the fray, a wild defender. Don't look back, Marco yelled, though Gus's head spun. unable to shake the image of the gunman recovering, ready to pursue them again. The dark forest forested the path ahead, limbs reaching toward them like jagged claws. As they barreled down the path, adrenaline transformed panic into raw energy. "We have to get to the creek. It's our only chance," Gus gasped, pushing his body even as it threatened to fail him. He could almost hear the rushing water in the distance, calling him like a lifeline. "Stick to the left. The path's narrower," Marco barked, veering off the main trail. With each stride, the fear turned to steely determination. They were not just running away. They were reclaiming their chance to fight back. Branches whipped at their faces, but the ache in Gus's legs paled compared to the weight of danger nipping at their heels. He could sense the gunman behind them, the sound of heavy footsteps crashing through the underbrush like a storm. An urgency screamed through the air. A blast rang out, followed by a deafening silence that rocketed fear through Gus's body. "They've got guns," he shouted, urging his muscles to push harder. Another roar echoed, a different one this time, distant but present. It mixed with the chaos, sending a ripple of doubt through Gus's mind. Was it a motorcycle? Were they being hunted, or did someone have their back? "Stay close." Marco's voice cracked slightly, but the intensity pushed them forward. The creek lay just beyond their reach, a promise of safety. They arrived at an iron rail fence. It stretched along the creek, but there was a gap, one that promised escape. Marco leaped through effortlessly, and Gus followed, adrenaline firing each cell of his body. The water was loud, crashing against the rocks below, cool mist washing over them as they dropped down the slope. In that moment of respite, they paused to catch their breath, hearts pounding like war drums. "You think we lost them?" Gus asked, eyes wide as he scanned the darkness beyond the trees. "For now," Marco said, though uncertainty lingered in his voice. "But we need to keep moving." They won't stop. A sense of vulnerability settled over them as they gazed at the dark, swirling water. It was as daunting as it was inviting. "What if we don't make it?" Gus whispered, the question heavy with unspoken thoughts. "We will," Marco asserted, but the shadow of doubt flickered. "We have to keep going." Just as they began to shift toward the water's edge, the distant shout of a voice rang through the night, drawing closer. "I know you're there. You can't hide forever." Panic gripped them again. "Move," Marco urged, feet splashing into the current. Gus hesitated, uncertainty gnawing deep in his gut. Would the water offer salvation or lead them further into danger? They faced the choice: stand and fight, or plunge into the unknown. As they waded deeper, the water chilling their bones, the shadows of their pursuers grew nearer. In that moment, as chaos loomed behind and uncertainty echoed in front, a thought emerged: what if the darkness held something unexpected? With a final glance at the shoreline disappearing behind them, Gus prepared to dive into the current. What awaited them on the other side? Would they discover how deep the darkness ran, or rise anew from the depths? The water swallowed them whole, the cold gripping their bodies as they fought the current. Gus could feel the chaos behind him, the shouts of the gunman and his crew, desperate to grab hold of whatever prize they thought Gus and Marco represented. He felt Marco's hand tightly wrapped around his wrist, a lifeline amidst the chaos. "We have to swim harder," Marco shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the water. Gus nodded, summoning every ounce of strength he had. Memories of his children flashed by: Brooklyn's laughter, Henry's goofy face. He could not lose that. He could not let fear swallow him whole. One strong kick after another, he propelled himself forward, urging Marco beside him as they swam toward the distant bank on the other side. They surged through the water, edging away from the sounds of pursuit. Each stroke felt like a wave of hope, pushing them deeper into the safety of the night. But just as they neared the opposite bank, the echoes of men shouting grew louder, impossible to ignore. "There they are. Over here." Heart racing, they quickly ducked beneath the surface of the water, holding their breath as panic rushed through their veins like fire. "Marco," Gus whispered, trying to keep his voice low. "We can't let them catch us." Suddenly, splashes erupted around them. Chaos filled the air as their pursuers waded into the creek, searching. The murky water clouded Gus's vision, but desperation bred determination. "They're coming," Marco said, urgency slicing through the silence between them. "We have to go under and swim." Just moments before panic spiraled, they dove deeper, feeling the cold water envelop them. Gus's heart raced as they kicked their legs, searching for the safety of the bottom. They kicked and fought their way forward, staying submerged for as long as they could. The shimmering glints of moonlight above urged them, a beacon guiding their path. Then, panic gnawing at his core, Gus looked back over his shoulder. The gunmen stood on the bank, their silhouettes hunting for shadows beneath the water's surface. "Don't surface," he mouthed to Marco, and they pressed onward, the desperation of freedom cloaked in the darkness of fear. Finally, feeling exhaustion set in, Gus pushed toward a cluster of rocks just beneath the surface. He fought against the current, bracing against the rough texture. With adrenaline pulsing through his body, he climbed on top, pulling Marco up beside him. They each gasped, hands fumbling for a grip on the safety at least for the moment. Gus's heart thudded wildly in his chest as the sounds of their pursuers faded. Breathing heavily, he turned to Marco, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and relief. "We did it," Marco gasped, shaking slightly as they caught their breath. "But we can't stay here." Gus's eyes locked on the shoreline they had just escaped. "They won't stop looking for us." The realization settled heavy on their hearts. They could not stay idle. They needed to embrace the courage that had brought them this far. Just then, the distant crackle of sticks echoed through the air. Gus's spine went rigid. "They're moving upstream." "Then let us move downstream," Marco shouted, urgency pulling them back into motion. Each footstep into the unknown became a testament to their resolve. With each glance back, fear mingled with hope. Would they transform from hunted into hunters? Or be claimed by the very darkness they fought to escape? The shadows of their past were relentless, yet their bond solidified with every step. They thickened with purpose, fueled by the memories of the laughter waiting for them after this night of chaos. As they moved through the dense trees, the wild thrum of the night enveloped them. The water behind them became a mirror reflecting the lives lost in the pursuit of survival, the weight of choices that both haunted and propelled them further. And then, out of the darkness, they spotted a light. A small cabin glimmered through the trees like a distant star. Their hope reignited. "Gus," Marco's voice broke through, bright with determination. "This is it. We can't give up now." With renewed purpose, they charged through the underbrush, heartbeats echoing as they approached the cabin door. "Open up," Gus shouted, pounding on the weathered wood, a prayer born from desperation and hope. Would someone hear them? Would they finally find safety? As the door creaked open, light spilled forth. A face leaned out, eyes wide in surprise. "Help us," Gus gasped, feeling the adrenaline rush, feeling life surge back into him. The voice that greeted them was not one stained by darkness, but rather illuminated by kindness. "Come in. You're safe here." As they stepped over the threshold, the weight of their trauma began to fade, like smoke dissipating in the night. They may have to face the shadows again, but tonight, they had rewritten their own narrative. Battered but not broken, Gus stood with Marco, finally breathing in a space filled with warmth, with life the possibility of rebuilding their future. Before they could find solace, profound realization dawned on Gus. This isn't just about us anymore. His heart swelled as he thought of his family, the laughter of his children ringing in his ears like a song. They would fight to reclaim the beautiful life that had once been theirs. Hope ignited within him, flickering against the cold fear that had waged war in his heart. He turned to Marco, a radiant smile breaking free. "Let us go home." And the night, heavy with uncertainty, began to fade behind them, replaced by the bright promise of a new dawn ahead. Now, as you stand on the edge of transformation, let Gus and Marco's journey shine a light for you. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and feelings about this ending. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. This is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe now. Don't wait not even one more second to share, because you know only true fans truly understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.